Thanks for tuning in to Hearts of Fire and another original short story video. For this part of the series, you can see we're in the fiction kitchen. So let's see what we can cook up. This story is called Dog on a Chain. And I have to apologize for some really foul language at the very end of the story, but the foul language is kind of the point. Um, and I have to tell you that at one point I did experience a fight like this that some neighbors were having. And sometimes something is just too good to not write a story about. This is one of those stories where I have to write about something I really don't know very much about, like the stock market or fishing. In this case, it's building a house. So if I've got something wrong, I bet somebody out there will tell me. This is a story about a lot of different things, about childhood baggage, about economic problems, about problems in a marriage, and also I think about how we value ourselves or fail to value ourselves and how we wish to be valued. So, anyway, Dog on a Chain, I hope you enjoy it. All day the sun had been in his eyes. All day he kept trying to swat it away, irritated without knowing why. It was early December, and the sun never climbed very high. It hovered just above the horizon, east and west, coming and going, dead level with his vision. Every time he sunk a nail, he had to angle himself, squinting to see. This was his life lately, a series of pissy little annoyances he couldn't do a thing about. Ken walked over to him, fiddling with his phone. "How's it going, Jay?" "Going all right." "Roof trusses?" "Tomorrow, I'm thinking." "Tomorrow would be good," Ken said, looking up from his phone long enough to nod at him, meaning don't screw up. "We're behind on the job. They were born behind. There was no other way contractors, Ken or anybody else, got things done. Business was a rolling calculus of bids, payments, money owed, cancellations, bankruptcies, actual and narrowly avoided, and once in a while a big paycheck that let you live to fight another day. The crew was framing one of Ken's houses, trying to get it enclosed and the roof on before the weather gave out entirely. They were pushing their luck. Right now the floor was only plywood-covered joists over a foundation. Three of the four main walls were wrapped, headers for the windows going in on the last one. He was hoping Ken would keep him on to do the subfloor and maybe some finish work on this or another of his projects. It shouldn't even be a close call. Ken knew that he got things done and done right. But Ken liked to play boss, that is, liked to remind you he was the boss, and sometimes he jerked you around for no reason except he could. So it wasn't a sure thing. Then on top of that, you had to hope the whole machine would keep chugging along and people could still afford to buy houses and bankers stayed fat and happy and willing to send money out the door and that the world didn't blow itself up anytime soon just so he could keep swinging a hammer and getting paid for it. All that and the sun in his eyes, too, which was nothing but a crybaby way to think. The house was part of a new development called Avonlea Estates. Yeah, sure. Another of those suburbs that wasn't fooling anybody. Maybe someday it would look like the developer's architectural rendering. Gracious, spacious, bodacious living. Three-car garages, killer landscapings, street names that made it sound like you'd wandered into Sherwood Forest. Right now it was a flat expanse of dirt and gravel, unfinished houses, rising, dinosaur skeletons, and here and there a sapling staked upright in a new and hopeful front yard. Jay couldn't afford to make fun of it, at least not out loud. You never knew when Ken might be feeling all touchy and offended that you didn't respect the quality and vision of the master plan. They worked until the sun went down, big and red now, and darkness came on as fast as ink spilling into the sky. Jay and the other two guys on the crew, both of them named Dave, Big Dave and Doobie Dave, packed up and loaded their tools, the compressors and generators and extension cords and anything else people might be inclined to walk off with. Ken sat behind the wheel of his Silverado, engine running, dome light on, talking on his phone. The Daves fired up their trucks and rolled out, tail lights receding. Jay slow walked the last of his loading, hoping Ken would take the phone out of his ear long enough so he could ask about indoor work for the winter. But Ken was probably staying on the phone to avoid any inconvenient pleading, and unless Jay wanted to wait him out and feel like a fool for doing so, he might as well leave. He had a last glimpse of Ken as he pulled away. The Silverado's cab an island of light. Ken's big square head was motionless, and he was either waiting on the line for somebody to answer, somebody he really didn't want to talk to, or listening to bad news. How old was Ken, anyway? 50? More or less, give or take. Old enough to complain about his bad back and his feet hurting, and probably a few more body parts he'd rather not hear about. Jay drove with care, bumping along the unpaved street. The work truck's suspension was close to crapped out. He followed his headlights until he reached the highway. He didn't understand why people wanted to live all the way out here with nothing around but bean fields and coyotes. He guessed developers sold themselves and everybody else on the ideas of growth and expansion, everything getting better and better. Probably why Ken didn't want anybody bad-mouthing Amazing Acres. Too many future big jobs riding on it. Ken, who wasn't exactly known for his sunny optimism, drinking the developer Kool-Aid, believing in paydays everlasting, hallelujah. The hell of it was, he wanted to be Ken, or at least wanted to be his own boss, the one bidding jobs and handing out the pay. Ken, except smarter and luckier and a lot better looking. Talk about optimism. But you had to want a thing bad enough. That was what made you keep putting your back in it, one day to the next, and the next, and the next. He drove home through the early dark and rush hour traffic out to his own part of town. This was also on the outskirts, but in a different way than the new raw suburbs. If you tipped the town on its side, all the poor people would have funneled out through his end. It used to be farmland, and here and there you saw an old pole barn or machine shed. Here and there somebody still grew an acre of corn or kept a backyard horse. Beyond his own tidy neighborhood, a few square blocks of solid ranch houses. The land was occupied by trailer parks, an old motel converted into rentals, occasional structures of cement block or blistered wood that housed the semi-rural poor. A collection of small businesses which were always either opening or closing. A discount bakery, power tool dealer, carpet cleaning service. He and his wife had bought here 3 years ago because it was all they could afford, their first house. She had been reluctant, not persuaded they'd ever get their money back. Jay had made promises. A remodeled kitchen, a second bathroom, work he knew he could do and would do just as soon as he got a little bit ahead and had time to get started. His wife didn't bring it up all the time, did not technically nag him, but it was one more thing. At the Casey's, he got gas and a six of Bud Light and drank two in the parking lot to try and soften the edge between his work life and the life waiting for him at home. It wasn't exactly that he was reluctant to walk into his own house, but his wife would want him to tell her how his day went and listen to her account of her own, and he didn't have anything against that, except that he'd spent the last 9 hours talking to himself inside his head, mostly. He was always slow to catch up when it came to actual speech, while his wife nodded along, so anxious to be a good listener, and him inevitably disappointing her without enough to say. At least enough harmless, chatty things that wouldn't set off bombs. An old boat of a Chevy Monte Carlo with a loose bumper pulled up across the parking lot, and he thought he recognized it as belonging to one of their new next-door neighbors. He'd only seen the two girls from a distance, so he watched as the driver, the blonde one with her hair pulled back in a bunch, got out, leaving the car running. The car's stereo was loud enough for Jay to hear it booming through the closed windows. A black guy slouched in the passenger side, waiting, head thrown back against the seat. He was wearing sunglasses, Jay noted. Jay guessed he had an opinion or a prejudice, call it that, about white girls who went out with blacks, at least when you weren't talking celebrities who collected rap stars or professional basketball players. That was a different kind of trashy as far as he was concerned. A bad feeling settled in him as he watched the blonde girl come out again with a pack of cigarettes, opening the driver's door and letting out a blast of fuckity fuck music noise, while the black guy, either a pimp or trying to act just like one, let his head loll to one side. They drove off, and when he reached his own driveway, the house next door was dark and quiet. He came in through the kitchen. Lisa wasn't there, but dinner was well underway and there were good smells of steam and beef. Home, he hollered in case she was back in the bathroom and hadn't heard the garage door. He put the beer in the fridge, wanting another, but thinking it was better to hold off. He removed his boots and Carhartts in the mudroom and washed his hands in the kitchen sink. He felt jumpy for no good reason, but he didn't want to have some searching conversation about it, then decided it was easier to open another beer and face that particular disapproval instead. "Hi, honey, you just get home? I was on the phone." Lisa advanced, arms outstretched, and there was some kissing. She'd changed into her house clothes, an old sweater and flannel pants. No bra, he ascertained. She was a soft weight, a warm armful, and he would have liked a little more friendly grab ass, even if it didn't lead to anything. But she had dinner to tend to. She was preoccupied with everything that had to be accomplished, and she pulled away. "I bet you're starving. Give me 20 minutes." They sat at the kitchen table to eat. "This is good," Jay said, because it was a stew with wine and mushrooms, and because you ought to say things like that. He tried to make an effort. If Lisa had noticed the beer gone from the six-pack, she hadn't said anything, and he wanted to keep that lucky streak going. Lisa said she was glad he liked it. She asked him how things went at work that day. How was the house? Jay said it was coming along, coming along. He talked about the roof trusses and needing to get them in place. Lisa knew what roof trusses were by now and what they meant to a project. She had asked enough questions. She said she hoped it hadn't been too cold, and Jay said not really, not if you kept moving, and anyway, he was used to it. Just as he was running out of gas when it came to interesting conversation about his workplace, Lisa said, "I might get moved over to reference." "Yeah? Well, there's a vacancy. I guess you have to apply." She worked at the library in circulation. Reference would be a promotion of sorts. She'd been waiting for him to get his talking done with so she could announce this piece of good news. "They should just give it to you." "Oh, sure." She was trying not to sound too excited. He bet she'd get the job. Things had a way of working out for her. He settled back to listen. She said she thought she was in a good position, though you never could tell, not really. They knew she was interested. She'd done her time doing the boring things like shelving and collecting fines and scanning books in and out. People often thought it was funny that his wife was a librarian, meaning he wasn't the kind of guy who hung around libraries. He and Lisa had met each other in a bar. Lisa had red hair and freckles, and she didn't think she was pretty, but she was. He liked her white legs and the roundness of her hips and the way her breasts looked and felt when she held her arms over her head. "Jay?" "What?" "I asked you if you'd be all right with me working some evenings if I had to." "Sure, I mean if you wanted to, if it was part of taking a new job." Lisa gave him a measuring look. "It's not like I'll know anything for a while." He must have had his beer face on, that's what she called it, when he spaced out, started nodding off with his mouth hanging open. He said, "Sure." You should tell them you'll do what they want and sort it out later. He was attentive now, but she pushed her chair back and got up to clear the plates. She said, "And I bet before too long you'll be in business for yourself." I wouldn't count on that. They're building all over town. Everywhere I drive, I see construction. That doesn't mean I'll be the guy in charge on the job site. You have the tools, you have the trailer. You can get cards printed up. I can help you with a website. He knew what she was doing. She didn't want him to feel left behind if she got a promotion. She wanted to encourage him, lift him up. Jay said, "We'll see. There's a lot that has to happen." She didn't understand how hard it would be for him to get greased in with a developer. Plus, he'd have to borrow somebody else's truck to pull the trailer. Plus, getting cash on hand just to get rolling. "I'm working on it," he said. "Every day I push it out a little farther." "I know. It's hard for me to do more than I already am." "I know," Lisa said again, but she didn't, not entirely. He watched her run water in the sink. He thought about showering and watching television in bed, but couldn't make himself get up just yet. The day had a habit of catching up with him once he had a full stomach. Lisa said, "I think the girls next door have a dog, a pit bull." "Yeah?" "It was out on a chain in the front yard when I got home. It's the first time I've seen it." "Maybe they were just watching it for somebody else," Jay said, not really believing it. "I wonder if the landlord has something in the lease about pit bulls. A lot of them do." "It's possible," Jay said. He thought about mentioning the black boyfriend, decided not to. They didn't always see things the same way. For instance, he didn't have anything against pit bulls, or at least he'd grown up with them and knew what to expect. Likewise, Lisa might think a black boyfriend was just a sign of diversity and inclusiveness and a bunch of other happy horse shit. The house next door was a problem they should have seen coming. When they'd moved in, an old couple had owned it, and Jay had helped them rake leaves, clean gutters, fix the loose screen door. Then the old man died, and the old woman went to a nursing home. He and Lisa had talked about buying the house and renting it out themselves, but the money just wasn't there. A realty company took it over. The realty company didn't much care about being an asset to the community. The house had a weedy, unloved look and was rented out to a succession of people you had to wonder about. Like the new girls. Neither of them appeared to leave for work in the mornings. Lisa, who got up later than Jay did, confirmed this. Nor was there any other evidence of employment, only comings and goings with plastic grocery bags and pizza boxes. The drapes and shades were kept closed. Once or twice the blonde girl had paraded up and down in front of the house, talking on her phone. Jay would have thought she wanted privacy, but she spoke loud enough that he could hear the F-bombs dropping even from inside. Cheap drama. Always plenty of that moving in next door. Like they required it on the application. Lisa said, "I haven't seen the one girl for a while, only the blonde. I still haven't talked to anybody over there. Maybe I should go say hello." "If you can keep away from the dog." "Oh, right, dog. Anyway, why bother? They probably won't be there very long if nobody's working." "We should have bought it when we had the chance." "We didn't have the chance," he reminded her. "We couldn't have gotten a loan." She didn't say anything to that, only kept rinsing and scraping dishes. Jay knew she didn't agree. She thought people could do anything if they really tried, and that success was a matter of perseverance. He thought that was naive, though he'd learned not to say so. His guess was that the one girl had moved out and the black boyfriend had moved in along with the pit bull. The rental company wouldn't care. They never did. The best you could hope for was that once in a while you'd get somebody next door who wasn't an active nuisance, and that the rental company might put some money into outside maintenance, keep the place from turning into a complete eyesore. They shouldn't have bought here in the first place. It was starting to feel like one of those things you talked yourself into when you should have told yourself to sit down and shut up. "Jay?" She was leaning over him, hands on his shoulders. Wake up and come on to bed. He groaned. It never felt good, waking up in a chair, bleary-eyed and stupid, and here he'd done it again. Why'd you let me sleep this late? Let you? I tried to wake you twice, and you wouldn't budge. By the time he got himself up and showered, Lisa was already in bed and the lights were off. He lay down next to her and fit himself to her curved back and set his hand exploring. Don't. His hand stopped. She said, I don't enjoy it when you've been drinking. He rolled away from her. He felt her turn towards him, watching him. She said, Do you want to talk about this? No. Good night, then. He waited until he thought she was asleep. He got up and used the bathroom and lay back down, looking up at the ceiling in the dark. The great good thing about sex, or at least one good thing, was that you didn't have to talk about it. It was what it was, and that was enough. So he was being punished. He thought the drinking was an excuse. There was something else she was unhappy about, and this was how she let it be known. She was disappointed in him. She'd thought he'd be doing better by now. The two of them would be doing better. He'd had some idea of him that was a mistake. He was supposed to be this amazing Paul Bunyan type who could uproot trees with his bare hands. He might not have an education, but he knew how to get things done, knew how to replace broken window glass, how to unstick a drain or replace light fixtures, or get up on a roof and have a look at the chimney, or any other chore that Lisa sent him out to do for her friends. He charged them the friends rate, which meant he lost money. But you never knew, one of them might have a big remodel project somewhere down the line. These people thanked him and told him he was a genius. He wasn't. Nearest he could figure out, there was something fascinating to them about skills they would never bother to learn themselves. Like he was some native person making fishnets out of palm fronds, some lumbering, oversized freak of nature that Lisa had taken in to raise. Her friends, who were all teachers or lawyers or computer system guys. He hadn't grown up like any of them. Lisa knew that. He'd sketched it in for her. Poor kid from a poor town. Not much in the way of expectations or support. He suspected it had been one more fascinating thing. Here he was, a creature from another planet as far as they were all concerned, planet Redneck, but still he was able to speak English and perform useful tricks. That wasn't fair, he knew, but there were times he got down on himself, like now, times he got down on her and allowed himself to put things in the worst possible light. He'd kept a lot from her. His was the kind of family you tried to put behind you, and he had. If she didn't like his drinking, she should have met the old man who had once cut open a man's stomach in a bar fight, had once smacked Jay so hard on his ear that it bled, had gone after his mother with a belt or his foot as she tried to crawl away, had been hauled off to prison every so often, not for beating his own family, which was considered a private affair, but for assaults on other citizens, or the possession of questionable property, or criminal trespass and damage, which meant he'd gone back to some bar he'd been thrown out of and wrecked the place. State trooper cars lined up in the driveway, lights revolving. Scratchy amplified voices squawked through the radios. Neighbors had come out to watch. At least with the old man locked up, there were no uproars morning, noon, or night, both predictable and not so, or the terrifying occasions he was in a good mood. Even though his mother might send him to beg money or food from the people next door, it was better than the old man and his sick, drunk presence. Had he ever worked a steady job? He fixed people's cars, he got hired on to demo buildings, and once he moved them into Fort Wayne for most of a year when a friend got him a job pushing the meal cart at the Soldiers and Sailors Home. But more often there were side hustles and dealings in contraband and small enterprises that didn't work out, like knife sharpening or breeding rabbits, and sooner or later everything had collapsed into good old low-down drunk poverty. He had some dim memories of his older brothers and sisters before the state put them into foster care, and times he and his mother had lived elsewhere, times he must have been sent away to live elsewhere. Always they'd ended up back where they started, and eventually the old man's health gave way from drink and meanness. Eventually Jay grew to his full size, and the old man left him alone. He and his mother became accustomed to stepping over him like he was a piece of furniture. It had been a small town the next state over from here. Still, he was always careful when he first met people, making sure they didn't come from anywhere nearby, not volunteering much of his own. A little place nobody's heard of it, or, if pressed, Indiana. The old man died. His mother died not long after. By then he was done with school and living with a girlfriend, working day labor. Things ended with the girlfriend, and with the girlfriend after that one, and by then he'd picked up enough roustabout skills to join a crew that built franchise restaurants along the interstates, living in motels for a few weeks at a time before they moved on to the next site. He managed to save some money and stay out of bad trouble. He bought up tools any chance he got, his only real expense. He had a knack for carpentry, and he learned enough of electrical and plumbing and HVAC to make himself handy. 5 years back, he'd liked the look of the town where he lived now. He'd asked around and found work and stayed behind when the franchise crew moved on. Then he'd met Lisa and liked the look of her. Now he had ordinary problems, the kind you might be grateful for, paying bills and keeping a woman happy, including the talk she set him down for about starting a family, which he guessed he wanted to, but maybe not right now, and anyway it wasn't going to happen at all if she got an attitude about staying away from him in bed. It wasn't like he didn't know about drinking and the 57 varieties of misery it could bring, and he'd even copped to the risk of having it in the family. But he wasn't his father, and Lisa couldn't appreciate that since he'd protected her from the ugliest parts of knowing. She wanted them to take vacations now and then, like other people. Nothing fancy, just a few days away, a chance to unwind. He said he couldn't do both things, hustle to get ahead like she wanted and turn down work. She said he worried too much. He had to find ways to handle stress, by which she meant ways other than beer. She wanted him to believe in his own potential, raise his sights, harness his talents. But his talent was for hard, dumb, back-breaking work. It was the only thing he'd ever had going for him, the thing that had allowed him to get out of his hometown and put some of the shame behind him. She wanted to lift him up, coax him along, build up his confidence like it was something from a mail-order kit. She wanted the new, successful, happy-time version of him, but maybe he'd already gone about as far as he could in that or any other direction. In the dark bedroom, he spoke out loud. Not everything works out the way you think it should. She was either asleep or pretending to be and didn't answer. In the morning, they were brisk and normal with each other because it was a work day and work drove everything. And anyway, it hadn't been such a big deal. And anyway, it was all going to come up again sooner or later, one way or another. Jay left early enough to get to the job site by 7, and Lisa didn't have to get up with him, but she did. He didn't eat breakfast, and he'd told her that he was good with stopping at Casey's for his coffee, but it must have been something she'd read in one of her magazines, some article about showing your wife cred by making sure you saw your husband off to work. So she pattered around the house in a pink bathrobe he'd bought her before he knew she didn't much like pink. She stood on tiptoe to kiss him goodbye, and she pressed herself against him, not so much as a promise, but an opening offer, which might be possible if he only had, say, one beer with dinner. He didn't want to start thinking about all that. He had to get his day going first before he imagined all the different ways he could drive it off a cliff. Lisa was looking over his shoulder. "Oh, that poor dog," she said. He turned and saw it hunkered down on its chain, head sunk on its paws, eyes closed. A big brown and white dog with a resigned look about it. "It's probably been out there all night." "You don't know that," Jay said, although she was probably right. "No shelter, no water, no food. I'm sure they bring it in to feed it." He could tell where this was going. I'm going to call animal control, have somebody come out and talk to them. They won't thank you for it. She'd do it too. She'd call from work using her best librarian voice, polite and urgent, not letting up. They'll say it's their dog and nobody else's business what they do with it, unless there's neglect or abuse. Then you should call, Jay said, giving up. You could never talk her out of anything once she got a notion fixed in her head. I have to get going. When he backed out of the drive, the dog opened its eyes to regard him but didn't move, trying to shrink into itself, or used to enduring, or both. There were people who didn't give any more thought to a dog than this, plenty of them. He'd grown up with them. They didn't know any better, and there was no point in instructing them. He could, if he wanted, try to loose the dog from its chain, coax it into the truck, then drop it off at the Humane Society. The girl and her boyfriend wouldn't bother looking for it. Odds were it would get put down eventually, though at least it would die warm. But he didn't do it. He drove away and closed his mind to it. Some dogs, like some people, were born into a certain kind of life. Who was he to say the dog was unhappy? It wouldn't know anything different. He got to the job site and stayed in the truck for another couple of minutes with the engine running, trying to soak up some heat. The Daves were here, but not Ken. Off doing important boss-type things, no doubt indoors. There was no real need to wait for him. He shut the engine off and got out. Let's hit it. They were building the roof trusses on site. You ended up with a better product than pre-built, and Ken being Ken, of course it was cheaper. The main structure would get roofed first, then the roofline extension for the second floor, and finally the garage. The sun was out, but it wasn't going to warm anything. Another day of swatting it out of his eyes, and there was a steady wind that wasn't going to make anything easy. There was a rhythm to it once the three of them got going. They used nail guns to brace the trusses and make the nail plates solid. They plumbed them and stood them upright so the joist wouldn't weaken. By the time Ken's Silverado rolled up, they had the main roof trusses done, and Ken said to go ahead and set them before they did anything else. They're saying it could snow tonight. They're saying that just to mess with you, Ken. Yeah, they know you're like warm-blooded, like a lizard. Comedians. Get the trusses up. With three of them it was easy, or it should have been. One to climb up and set the corner, then use a 2x4 pusher to get it in position. The second man rigged a rope pulley to hoist the other side, while Jay, because he was the biggest, always got the joy of lifting and steadying from the ground. It wasn't that much weight, but you had to guide it so it didn't swing loose or low and pull everybody down along with it. They got the first four up, set and secured. It was pretty straightforward, at least Jay had seen worse. The sun made him squint and then yawn. Ken was tripping about snow. The first corner of the next truss was in place and the rope was walking the second corner up, and somebody said, "Careful, Jesus." And then he was on the ground. His eyes were open, but all he saw was white exploded light. He reached up and took hold of his head to make sure it was still there. Somebody was saying, oh man, and somebody else said, "Don't try to get up," which was stupid because how was he supposed to do that? Should we call or get him to the ER or... His wool stocking cap felt odd, different. It was because there was blood sloshing around inside. It felt warm, then cold. "Hey, buddy, you think we could get you into the truck?" He didn't nod because he was being careful about his head, but he held both arms out like a little kid, and they pulled him until he got his feet underneath him. They put him in the front seat of the Silverado and gave him a towel to wrap around his head. "Sorry," Jay said, "a mess." Meaning he was sorry if he was making a mess all over Ken's leather seats. "Don't worry about it." "I need my truck. Dave's bringing it. He's following us." "Which Dave?" "Big Dave." "Oh." Payne was right there waiting for him once he got around to it, a big, gaudy, whomping wave, but he thought maybe he could hold it off a while if he kept talking. "Wind must have swung that puppy right into me." Ken was humping to get through traffic and didn't answer. Jay thought in a detached sort of way that Ken was in a lot of trouble if he up and died or got himself bad crippled. Lisa would join forces with one of her lawyer friends and they'd turn it into a righteous cause. Money was one thing, sure, but she didn't understand that in this kind of work people got hurt. The pain stirred and stretched in him like a cat waking up. I have to call my wife, he said apologetically. Once we get where we're going, buddy, we're coming around the mountain, all right? In the ER, they rolled him around on a gurney from one place to another. It was a little annoying being fussed over and tended to like a baby, not to mention the things they did that hurt. In between their attentions, Big Dave entertained him with a story about some crazy Irish ironworker he'd known who had ridden a 12-foot ladder all the way down, face planted on a sidewalk, then got up and said with real relief, "Wow, I'm glad it's just my face." Lisa arrived and wanted to know what had happened to him and how was he now and what were the doctors doing for him. Ken went outside to talk on his phone, and Big Dave said he'd better catch up with him if he wanted to ride. And here were the keys to the truck, and not to worry, he was going to be every bit as beautiful as ever. Ha ha, Jay said. Once a wife showed up, everybody else made themselves scarce. Does it hurt? Lisa asked, her fingers floating just above where they'd stitched him up like a baseball. Stings some. He thought it was a stupid question. They don't want to give you a lot of pain meds just now. They want you to stay awake. All right. I wish you worked in a coffee shop or a ladies' shoe store, someplace things like this didn't happen. Not now, okay? The last thing he wanted to think about was work and how long he might be out, and if he'd done the kind of damage that would leave him less than whole, or if he should be like Big Dave's ironworker, grateful that it was just his face. They kept him 12 hours to make sure he didn't have any brain bleeds. They gave him an ice pack to hold over the swelling. He got a look at himself in a bathroom mirror, a purple, meaty section of forehead, eye, and cheekbone with some raw scrape places around it. You were supposed to say, I've hurt myself worse having a good time, and maybe he would once he felt like having a sense of humor about it. Lisa drove him home. They'd have to come back for the truck. A light snow swept across the windshield. Snow, he pointed out, and Lisa said, yes, that's right. Probably worried that he'd gone simple-minded, but he was too tired and beat up to explain. He slept, woke up feeling worse, slept again. In the morning, he told Lisa she should go on to work. Yes, he was sure. He'd call if he needed anything. He didn't want her asking him how he felt every 15 minutes when what he felt was lousy. Once she'd left, he got up and dressed and sat in the living room for a change of scenery. There were 3 or 4 inches of snow on the ground and more promised for tomorrow. Jay wondered if Ken and the Daves were getting any work done today or if the weather made them take a break. He didn't exactly want to be out there right this minute. His face and scalp kept sending out unpleasant reminders, but he was restless. Ken would probably call later to make sure he hadn't died. There would be a conversation, and Jay didn't know how it would go beyond the not dead part. Ken might ask him when he thought he could get back to work, which would mean he still had a job, or tell him to take his time, meaning he'd find somebody to replace him. It wouldn't be anything personal, just one of those Ken things having to do with money. Bad thoughts kept piling up behind other bad thoughts. He couldn't put together just how the accident had happened. The wind, he'd said to Ken, who hadn't agreed or disagreed. Maybe Doobie Dave had let the rope slip. No one had said anything about the rope. What he didn't like to think was that it was his own fault. He'd been careless in some way he couldn't remember, which meant he was losing a step, running out of luck, and he might do the same dumbfuck thing or worse all over again. He got up from his chair to put his coffee cup in the sink. In the driveway between the 2 houses, the blonde girl from next door was pacing up and down, talking on her phone. She was loud enough that he could follow the thread of the conversation, her displeasure at some third party, the boyfriend, requiring many swear words. The dog watched her from the end of its chain. It didn't seem to be getting its hopes up. Jay's phone rang. Ken. He answered right away. Hello. Morning. How's the head? Still attached. Not too bad. Careful to give himself some space to go in either direction. I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow. Yeah, good idea. You guys working today? Seemed like a good time to stand down, weather and all. Yeah, sure. He waited. He wished that Ken would just come out and say whatever it was he had to say. Are my tools in my truck? I hadn't looked yet. Doobie Dave picked up your skill saw and all the rest. I can have him run them over to you. They're going to do some painting at the shop today. I could come by, Jay said, though the truck was still sitting at the hospital. I'm good to do painting. You should rest up, see what the doc says. Give me a call week after next, why don't you? We'll see where things stand. Jay watched the blonde girl making windmill movements with her free arm. He waited, but it seemed that Ken was through talking. Will do, he said. Take it easy with the head, Ken said, and hung up. So he guessed he'd been laid off or put on some kind of shit list. He'd have to either talk his way back onto Ken's crew or start over with somebody else. He replayed the conversation and tried to make it go differently, but it wouldn't budge. He heard the blonde girl say, fuck that shit, seriously. Him and his whole fucking... He put on his coat and boots and left the house by the back door. The blonde girl didn't see him until he reached the driveway. She stopped talking and let her hand with the phone in it drop to her side. You need to watch your language, Jay told her. I don't want to hear that kind of talk from my living room. Keep it down, clean it up, or go inside. She gaped at him, then sidled towards her back door. She got herself inside and slammed the door after her. Jay looked at the dog. It turned around in the circle it had made in the snow and lay down, uninterested in him. Jay followed the girl to the back of the house and beat on the storm door so it rattled. He waited, then beat on it again. The black boyfriend opened it. The room behind him had a funky, perfumey smell, the smell of closed-in living. Music boomed. What? The boyfriend demanded. She say, yeah, I know what she says. Everybody on the street hears her. Nobody's business what she say. Jay guessed it was meant to come out tough and challenging, but the boyfriend was shorter than Jay, as was almost everybody, and Jay hadn't given any thought to how he must look, his head stitched together like some Frankenstein monster, blood and dried blood surrounding the gash. He saw the boyfriend recoil without really moving, drawing back at the sight of him. Jay said the first thing that came to him, "My wife doesn't like your dog." That's too bad, the man said automatically, because what else were you supposed to say? And Jay knew he'd handled it wrong, had turned it into a fight about each other's women, the kind of thing nobody ever backed down from. The boyfriend was wearing sweatpants and a gray t-shirt that said Alcatraz Swim Team, which was at least a little funny once you thought about it. Look, Jay said, taking the reasonable tone he should have used from the beginning. She worries when it's out all the time in cold weather. She's all tender-hearted, you know? She'll call somebody if she hasn't already, like the sheriff. She could send the sheriff over here. Huh. Still mistrustful. Jay wondered where the girlfriend was, hiding, he hoped, and staying out of it. The cold felt briefly good on his bare head, then it hurt like torment. He said, Me, I don't care. Your dog, you do what you want, but spare yourself some trouble. Oh, the man said again, but in a way that signified he might be considering it. The music behind him changed over to something slower, but just as loud. You want the dog inside? That make you happy? Keep everybody inside, Jay said, which was pushing his luck, but the boyfriend ducked his head, trying not to smile. What happened to your face, man? I've hurt myself worse having a good time. Take it easy. Jay turned and headed back to his own house. When he got inside and looked out, the dog was gone. Inside, he hoped, though it was also possible, it had simply been set loose. He guessed he was still pissed off and wasn't done doing stupid things just yet. He found a hooded sweatshirt he could pull over his head without making his scalp feel like it was coming loose. He took his keys and wallet and headed out to get his truck. He reached the bus stop on the corner, waited there long enough to rage about the waiting, and set out walking. The hospital was 2 miles away, and he needed every step of it to get himself good mad. Did Ken think he'd screwed up, been careless on purpose? He should come out and say so straight up. Did he even believe there was such a thing as an accident? The goddamn sun in his face made his eyes tear up. One sock was slipping down into his boot, and his foot was getting rubbed and raw. Bring it on. He'd have to tell Lisa that the job had been yanked out from underneath him. He'd have to put up with her indignation and sympathy and helpful suggestions and treating him like he was some special needs case, a charity project. By the time he reached the hospital parking lot and found the truck, he was lightheaded and the gash on his head was beating with its own pulse. He thought about going inside and having somebody tend to him, but he wanted to get home while he could, so he started the truck, which needed some cursing to get itself running, and sat in the parking lot until he felt steady enough to make the drive. When Lisa got home late in the afternoon, he was stretched out on the couch watching a basketball game. He was drinking beer and he waited for her to say something about that, but she didn't, not right away. She said, "There you are." "Yeah, hey. I tried to call you 4 different times today and all I got was voicemail." "Must have been asleep. I thought maybe you had to go back to the hospital." "Nope. I see the truck here. How'd that happen?" "Dave gave me a ride over. I don't know if you should be driving yet." "Well, I did, and nobody died." She advanced and stood over the couch. "Your face is turning colors. You ought to be icing it." She bent down. "Let me look at your head." "Just leave it. It's fine." He rolled away from her. "It's not fine, and I need to see if you're running a fever." "I don't have a fever. I have a hole in my head." "What is the matter?" "You're not going to make it better any faster with fussing over it." "Fussing," she repeated, turning the word into something you wouldn't want in your mouth. "Look, I'm tired and I don't feel like talking about it." She didn't say anything else, only walked away and hung up her coat in the closet and went back to the bedroom to change out of her work clothes. Jay got up from the couch and fetched another beer. When Lisa came back in, she opened the refrigerator and began pulling things out for dinner. He guessed she was going to punish him with silence, but if that kept her from standing over him and asking how he felt and reminding him about his doctor's appointment and did he want anything particular in the way of groceries, that was all right. He wanted to be left alone with his stinking bad mood and not have to explain himself, and why couldn't she just cut him some slack? Lisa served him his dinner plate on the couch. He fell asleep there and woke up late after she'd already gone to bed. In the morning, she woke him on her way out the door to say, "You need the insurance card for your appointment. It's in the kitchen next to the vitamins." "Yeah, okay." He couldn't remember right away if they were supposed to be mad at each other. "Ask the doctor if a head injury can turn somebody into an asshole." He heard the door close behind her and her car starting up, so I'm still mad. And he'd missed a chance to apologize and make things right, or maybe she hadn't given him a chance. At the hospital, he sat and waited for his name to be called. Other people waiting were trying not to look at him. He guessed he wasn't very pretty. One eye was puffy, and the bruising around it was a dirty yellow. They'd shaped his head along the path of the stitches. He looked like a diagram of his injury. Start here, stitch along dotted lines. The physician's assistant was a young Indian man with slender brown fingers. Almost all the doctors were from somewhere else these days. What was it about growing up in a foreign country that made these guys hustle straight to the top of the heap? Did he wish he'd been born in India himself? He didn't think so, but sometimes he had to wonder. The Indian doctor, or almost doctor, used gauze and cotton swabs to clean the gash and apply a new layer of antibiotic salve. He checked Jay's blood pressure and reflexes and shone a small flashlight in his eyes. Watch the light, he said, moving it back and forth. Any blurred or double vision? Dizziness? Confusion? No? Any other problems? Well, I got in a fight with my wife, Jay said, and the flashlight lowered. It looks like she won, the Indian doctor said. He didn't have any accent, but like that was one more smart thing he'd learned. Sorry, bad joke. After the hospital, he didn't want to go home right away, but he didn't feel like being anywhere people were going to stare at him. He used the last of the money in his wallet to put gas in the truck and go through the drive-through at McDonald's. He'd have some kind of paycheck due to him from Ken, but he'd forgotten to ask about it, and Ken had conveniently forgotten too. He could go looking for them at the shop, just show up and start working like no big deal. The face looked worse than it felt, except it didn't feel that good. It felt like a layer of brain had been peeled back. Besides, if he showed up, Ken would probably start one of his conversations where sorry was every other word. And Jay wouldn't be able to get his stupid mouth in gear to argue back or make any kind of case for himself. There was nowhere else to go but home. Lisa hadn't called. That meant something, he guessed. While he waited for her, he did a load of laundry and shoveled the drive and hoped that might earn him some points for trying. Next door, there was nothing to see. The Monte Carlo was gone. No dog on the end of the chain. Lisa came home later than usual. She'd stopped at the grocery and Jay got up to help her with the bags, but she said not to bother. There was only one more. She didn't seem actively mad at him, and he was willing to follow her lead. Maybe she'd ease off him, seeing as how he'd gotten himself bloody. Maybe they could just let things slide. At first, it seemed as if they might. They ate dinner, and Lisa asked him what the doctor said, and Jay told her it was all pretty normal, the normal healing process. When they finished eating, he offered to do the dishes, and Lisa said he didn't have to do that. But we do need to talk. No, they didn't. All right, he said. His heart sank. I mean, both of us. You don't get to sit there like the great stone face while I do all the work. Stone face, Jay said, patting his bruises. Funny. She didn't think so. Now who's the stone face, he said, trying again. I'm very glad you didn't hurt yourself any worse. It's not like I did it on purpose, Lisa. She waved this away. He would not be allowed to be righteously angry. I know you don't feel very good, but this isn't just about your head. You aren't happy. You haven't been happy for a long time now. Huh. Wow. Surprise made him stutter. Well, you totally have me all figured out. No, I don't. You won't tell me anything. I just know. I want to know why you can't let me in. Let you in? What's that supposed to mean? Jay? I'm not like you. How so? I don't have an answer for everything, okay? I'm not glib. She sat back on her chair, fixing him with a steady, sad look. He hated the way they argued. She was so much better at it. Before he'd said anything, he'd already lost. I'm not in the mood for a big interrogation, Lisa. See the head? See the stitches? Give me a break. No, I don't think I will. There's always some reason you won't tell me what's going on with you. You're tired, you're busy, there's a game on television. She paused to see if he had anything to say. He didn't. Start anywhere, she said. Feel free. But he felt only panic and resentment muddled with anger. He said, I'm doing the best I can, Lisa. I'm trying to get through some things. It doesn't help to complain. It's not complaining, it's communicating. Communicating, that's a word that would have gotten me a smack upside the head when I was growing up. Really? You weren't allowed to talk? It was a relief to catch her saying something snarky. He seized on it. That what you did growing up, Lisa? Sat around the dinner table? Oh, let's communicate a little more before dessert, huh? Like that? Stop it. You're being obnoxious. Another $10 word. Gee, I wish I was a librarian. That got her out of her chair and out of the room, and he guessed that was what he'd wanted, though he'd have to pay for it later. Say it was his head. The pain made him ornery. He was sorry and hoped that would be the end of it, this time at least. She didn't know him. She didn't know how many words he'd swallowed down in his lifetime, so that trying to cough them back up was painful. Didn't know the bone-deep resentment that came with being poor and being despised, despised for good reason, and how that got turned into a snarling kind of pride in your own low-down ways. You were all those things everybody said, and what of it? The one thing you had going for you was you didn't care, and the one thing you better not do was pretend you were something better, dress better, talk better, anything better, because then who were you and what did you have left of yourself? Most of the time now, he felt like a fraud and a fool. You scabbed over the same way as the gash on his head would, and all it would take to open it was weakness. She wanted to understand him as she thought a wife was meant to, but what he didn't want her to know was his weakness. It was hard to stay out of each other's way in a small house, but that's what they did until bedtime, when Jay waited for her outside the bathroom. Sorry, he said when she came out. Head injuries turn people into assholes. I guess. She still wasn't happy with him. Get well soon. We're all right, Jay said, wanting to reassure both of them. We're all right for right now. He wanted to say, don't give up on me, but it was one more thing stuck in his throat. They had just gotten into bed when the racket outside started up. They looked at each other. Now what? Jay went to the kitchen to look, raising a window blind. Lisa followed. The Monte Carlo was parked in its usual spot next door, and another car was pulled up in the driveway behind it. Its headlights were on, and two people were moving in and out of the light. Doors slammed. There was some hollering. The blonde girl and her boyfriend were stomping around in the snow, facing each other down, advancing and retreating. The argument went back and forth. Did not, did. There was another black man sitting behind the wheel of the running car, as impassive as a taxi driver. Lisa said, should we call the police? Is anybody getting hurt? Jay was about to say he didn't think so, or not yet, when the boyfriend found a new taunt. Suck my dick, bitch. A moment of stupefied silence before the girl responded, hey, suck my dick, bitch. Suck my dick, bitch. Suck my dick, bitch. Lisa said, why is she? Suck my dick, bitch. Suck my dick, bitch. Suck my dick, bitch. Suck my dick, you bitch. Suck. It went on for a while like that. Then the blonde girl went into the house through the back door and slammed the door behind her. The boyfriend followed and pulled on the door, which wouldn't open. He tried once more in a half-hearted way, then got into the running car, which backed out of the driveway. Well, Lisa said, I guess that's that. But as they watched, the back door opened again and the blonde girl came out, carrying a plastic laundry basket heaped with clothes. She put it in the trunk of the Monte Carlo and went inside. She returned with an armload of clothes on hangers, then a cardboard box, then a number of plastic garbage bags, throwing everything in hard enough for them to hear it. Chunk, chunk, chunk. Then she slammed the trunk shut and drove off, tires spitting gravel. Looks like somebody's moved out, Jay said. If we're lucky. I wonder who gets the dog. I hope it's all right. Jay said he hoped so too. He thought he'd hold off talking about the dog. That was the worst, rottenest. I don't understand why she'd say that about. Maybe she doesn't want to let a good insult go to waste. They got back in bed and said good night. The room was quiet, but they weren't asleep. The mattress quivered as if from the motion of a slight current, water or electricity. Suck my dick, bitch. 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 By then they were both sputtering and helpless with laughter. They let it go on for a while longer. When they did start talking, he thought he would begin with Ken, or maybe the dog.